Transition is a unique and personal thing for each trans person. It encompasses any steps we take to affirm our gender, and therefore it encompasses quite a wide range of things. Although by no means your transition should look exactly like mine, I just thought you might like to hear about the steps that I've taken and just get a general idea of what a transition can look like. So, come listen to that journey of that person whose videos you've been watching. You have been watching the other videos, right? Anyway, let's get this started. Hello my darlings, and welcome to my little corner of the internet, where I talk about the things I've learnt and discovered about myself as a trans woman. I think before I get down into the details of my own transition, I'd like to actually discuss what transition actually is. Transition technically comes from the phrase gender transition, which I personally don't agree with. I strongly affirm that I am and always have been a girl. Yes, even when I look like this. I just didn't always understand that. Therefore, I'm not transitioning from one gender to another, I'm simply just affirming the gender that I always have been. Other people's perception of my gender did change, but my gender did not. I therefore feel that this process is better described as a gender affirmation journey. However, as transition is the most commonly used and understood word, I will continue to use it for clarity. It is also okay if you, as a trans person, do not view your experience of your gender in the same way that I do mine. We are not a monolith. We all have different experiences and different ways of expressing them, and they are all equally valid. So moving onwards, I like to break down transition into 3 categories: social, medical, and legal. Starting backwards is easier. So, legal transition are any steps you take to get your gender and perhaps your new name recognized and changed in legal documents. These are things like your passport, driving license, and birth certificate. The process for these vary massively depending on what country you're in. Next, medical transition. These are any medical steps taken to affirm one gender, so often hormone replacement therapy and or surgeries. Access to these things is also highly dependent on where you are in the world. And finally, social transition is just anything that isn't covered by the other two. Things like coming out, using different pronouns and or names, changing hairstyle, and changing your wardrobe. A trans person does not need to go through any of these steps to be valid. They do not have to, or even want to, medically, legally, or socially transition to be valid. Once again, we all have different experiences and it's important to respect that. All transitions are valid, with none being more or less valid. Where you are on your journey does not invalidate your identity either. So, we'll get a few of the gender affirmation things I did before coming out of the way first. Quickfire style. When I was young, growing out my hair was probably the first ever gender affirming thing I did, and unknowingly so. I had no specific reason, I just wanted long hair. Unfortunately I cut it to avoid bullying, so perhaps you could say I even detransitioned at that point. I joke, but this experience still affects me to this day and is one of the main reasons my hair is so important to me. Anyway, when I was around 16 I asked my girlfriend at the time to do my makeup and paint my nails. Once again, not really with the express desire to act like a girl, more it just interested me. By 17 I would paint my own nails pretty infrequently, and when I got to university I'd start painting them pretty frequently. I mostly just enjoyed the extra level of expression that it gave me. When I was 18 I would go to a 1920s themed birthday party dressed as a flapper girl. I got the idea to do it and wouldn't let it go. I even did my own makeup for it. At this time I was also reblogging posts about trans affirmation and awareness on Tumblr. At around 21 I said to a friend that I was pretty indifferent about my gender. I didn't mind being perceived as a boy, but I wouldn't mind being perceived as a girl either. This was me struggling with denial. Then, just under 3 years ago, I started seriously experimenting with my girlfriend at the time's clothes. And a few months later, I admitted to a therapist I believed I was trans, struggling to get out the words and even approach the subject because I knew as soon as I did, it would become real. That was the first time I came out, and honestly, it was a weight off my shoulders. So what happened after that therapy session? I started coming out to everyone. I'll go more into specifics about my initial coming outs in a future video, but for now I'll give you a brief overview. I started with my girlfriend at the time and then my closest IRL friend, both of whom I knew were already close to a trans person, so although still scary, I was confident they'd be accepting. I then came out to my close family one by one. My mum, my brother, and finally my dad. The last of which really surprised me with how supportive he was, as I was honestly expecting to be disowned. It goes to show that people can change their views for someone that they care about. I then sent messages to a couple of group chats of close friends before making a public Facebook and Instagram post in early July of 2023. I also came out to my boss, and then my co-workers, as well as my teachers, and then my classmates. I told them my new name and pronouns and just told them to expect me to be dressing differently the next time they saw me. If anyone had any issues, they didn't make themselves known. My boss and my teachers also reassure me that if any transphobic comments were made, they would be by my side, no questions asked. So that was a lot of coming out I did in about the space of 3 to 4 weeks. And believe me, it was exhausting and scary. I was fully prepared and believed that I would lose people. But it was worth it. I really couldn't bear to wait, and now I was so relieved that I didn't have to hide myself from anyone. The next time I spoke to my therapist, I was presenting as a woman. However, to present myself as I wanted, I first needed to get some new clothes and makeup. At first, I would use a bit of my ex's makeup with her permission, and would wear more androgynous clothing to go out and just build up a little bit of confidence. After a few days of this, I took myself to the thrift store to pick up quite a few pieces of clothing that I liked the look of. These were mostly feminine cut t-shirts and jeans, nothing too out there. I don't actually have a lot of these clothes anymore as my style has changed, but they really helped me get started. I then started dressing in more feminine clothing all of the time, and eventually when my ex told me I needed to get my own makeup, I took myself to the pharmacy and asked for advice. There I was very kindly assisted by a staff member and ended up getting some BB cream, concealer, mascara, some eyeshadow and blush. I now had essentially what I needed to present myself how I wanted, and the confidence to go out and get some more things if I wanted to. This was all done within a month or two of me coming out because, once again, I just couldn't bear to wait and I didn't care what other people thought of me. This was honestly the most liberating part of the experience, finally getting to express the real me. I'd found joy in shopping, and despite there being the sense of judgment and danger, the desire to be me was greater. Now that was all relatively quick, but one of the steps I couldn't speed up was voice training. Even after doing all that, I still sounded like this.
Bonjour et bienvenue à mon explication des fichiers.
Sorry for the French. This was something I wanted to change, so I started following various YouTube tutorials and thought I got a pretty decent hang of it, but I lacked the self-discipline and acknowledging where I needed to go to improve. So I put myself on the waiting list for a speech pathologist who I knew was experienced in voice feminization. It took a while, but I started seeing them in August of last year and had meetings with them at a frequency about once every month and a half. This gave me enough time to practice in between sessions, and well, now I sound like this. Voice training is a huge amount of continued effort, facing your gender dysphoria head on, but it has helped me become so much more confident and comfortable. I still want to go further with my voice, but I am no means unhappy with it, otherwise editing these videos would be pretty difficult. And that brings most of the social steps I've taken to a close. So now, let's talk medical. When I changed my preferred name at the college I went to, I was put in contact with a social worker who then put me in contact with someone who could diagnose me with gender dysphoria so that I could be referred to an endocrinologist who could prescribe me HRT. I was lucky that I only had to wait a couple of weeks for my first session. It then took 2 sessions of me talking about my experiences as well as being informed of the risks that come with HRT to receive a diagnosis and a referral letter for HRT. It was pretty exhausting, but by this point I was pretty used to talking to mental health professionals about myself and my feelings. And this time it was for a really good reason. I then sent the letter off to an endocrinologist who gave me an appointment about a month later, during which he prescribed me estradiol and this T blocker, as well as a blood test that I'd need to do before taking my first dose. So, the day after, the 15th of August 2023, I did a blood test in the morning and started HRT. I started on pills and had my estradiol dose increased after about 3 months. Then, after a year, I started on progesterone and switched to injections. You can listen to more of my HRT journey here if you haven't already. I'm also scheduled to get bottom surgery later this year, which I discuss in this video. Lots of self-promotion today. And finally, legal. My process has been a little bit more complex as I don't live in my birth country. However, it's still been relatively straightforward. Luckily, I visited the UK a couple of weeks after coming out, where I was able to get a couple of friends to sign my deed poll. Changing your name is very easy in the UK. You just need to print off something with a specific wording found on the government website. You can also find templates available online. Then you write your dead name, your chosen name, and have 2 UK residents sign it as witnesses. And now you have what's known as an unenrolled deed poll, and it's all you'll ever need. Some people may press you to enroll it, and not only does this cost money, but it also puts your dead name and chosen name on a publicly available website that is a massive safety concern. It has been ruled that unenrolled deed polls are as legally binding as enrolled ones. If people refuse to accept your unenrolled deed poll, you can strong-arm your way by threatening, formal complaints, and taking legal action. I luckily only had to threaten this once. With this deed poll, you can then change your name at banks and other places. Technically, as gender is not needed for the services they provide, they only store a title which you can ask to be changed to. Once I got my gender dysphoria diagnosis, I could use that along with my deed poll to change my name and gender on my passport. And once I received that, I was able to easily change it everywhere else. So the electoral register, my driving license, medical records, elsewhere. Because I got a new passport, I had to apply for new permits, which were then issued in the correct name and gender, so then I could use them to change everything remaining here. Although I have had difficulties getting my Quebec driving license changed. Unfortunately in the UK you need a GRC to change your birth certificate, which is an incredibly long and frustrating process, and it's even more difficult for me as it requires me to talk to 2 medical doctors registered in the UK. So I have not done this yet and it frustrates me greatly. It has, however, been an incredibly relieving process to get it changed everywhere else, so I no longer receive formal documents addressed to my dead name and that I have IDs that are, well, correct. It's validating in a way and it just feels right, and for me, it's definitely been worth the effort so far. And so I think that's a pretty good overview of everything I've done so far, and you'll notice that in the grand scheme of things, it hasn't been that long. I've only actually been out for about 2 years and 2 months. Now, if you think that that means that I don't have enough experience to talk about the things I do, that's valid. I don't mean to pose myself as an expert, just someone who has thought way too much about this stuff and wants to share their thoughts and experiences. However, what I would like you to take away from this is just how much you can achieve in such a short amount of time. And in reality, it's not all those transition steps that I did quickly I'm most proud of, it's actually how confident and assured I am in my gender. I am here feeling like the woman I know I am, and that's because of the amount of effort I've put into being me. I am not special. You can see from my last video that I came from very little confidence, but I built that up through sweat and tears and a huge amount of deconstructing internalized transphobia. But I believe if I can do it, anyone can. Before I go, I want to remind you not to compare your transition to mine. They won't be the same and we won't have the same goals either. And if you don't go as fast as I did, you are not a failure. You are simply just going on the journey that is right for you. We are not a monolith. We are all unique individuals with our own lives and personalities and will struggle with different things. It is also valid if you don't want your transition to look like mine. We all have different goals because we're so diverse. It is okay if you stumble, it is okay if you wait. The important thing is you hold on, be strong, ask for support and help when you need it. My story is one of so many, and I hope that you too will have a story of your own courage and perseverance to share, either now or in the future. I believe in you. And there you go. And well, I think you now know more about me than you did before. So if you enjoyed that video, feel free to give it a like. If you want to continue to follow me on my journey, feel free to subscribe. And feel free to comment below if you want me to go into more detail about any part of my transition. And also feel free to share your own transition stories if you'd like. And if you want to hear more from me, feel free to follow me on Blue Sky or come join me when I stream on Sundays at 1 PM Eastern Time. I'm always happy to see you there. However, until the next time, bye!